And so for me, I wanted some lasting relationship with my patients. I think it's really important for a person to develop a relationship with their physician. So I think you have to be an advocate. Get your lab results yourself, get your records yourself. If you don't like something, get a second opinion. So don't be afraid, because you're not only affecting yourself, but you're affecting your family, your children, you know, the people that love you, your friends. They don't want to see you die. A door opens, it's up to you whether you're going to step through that door. And the thing that keeps people from stepping through that door is fear. And there's been times in my life, and not as many anymore, where I go back and I say, I should have did that, or I should have took that chance. Teaching is something that I knew I was destined to do. It was something I was committed to do. So then I started saying to myself, if I'm going to a different country, I'm going to learn those customs of that country. I'm going to learn at least 10 basic words in their language. Because if you can connect with your audience no matter where they are in the world, that's really essential. And so I gave the lecture, it went well, and afterwards one of the chief people said to me, your lecture was amazing, because usually we get some of the other foreign people and they talk down to us. They talk, you know, in their language, and they don't make any attempt to understand our customs and things like that.
This week on American Real, we bring you Dr. Jim Kondrup, who's an obstetrician-gynecologist specializing in minimally invasive surgery. What I really respect about Dr. Kondrup is that he travels the world training other physicians on his specialty. In addition, he wants patients to become their own advocate today, doing your own research and bringing that to your medical professional. He also has a YouTube channel that has become an international resource for medical students and doctors around the globe. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Dr. Jim Kondrup. This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks, and today we would like to welcome Dr. Jim Kondrup. Dr. Kondrup, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. Great to be here today with you guys.
Well, I've been looking forward to our conversation to discuss your specialty. It's very intriguing. I love watching your YouTube videos.
Thank you.
And the education that you're doing around the world, really, to help other surgeons and professionals in the medical field. But before we get into that, can you tell us about your upbringing and how it all came to be, you know, as a young man to want to take on this field?
Well, it's a ways back now, because I'm getting up there in the ages, but I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was actually born in Naples, Italy. My father was in the Navy, and it was time for me to be born. I was born on a naval base in Naples, so I had dual citizenship until I was around 18 years old. So then we came back to the United States, of course, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. We grew up kind of poor. My mom basically raised 4 kids on her own. My dad kind of left, and so for a time it was very challenging. We were kind of poor. I kid with my friends that we used to have to travel down, walk down to the different places and pick up the government food, the government jelly, the government cheese, the milk, things like that. And growing up, we really didn't have brand new clothes. We used to have to go to the store, sort of like a TJ Maxx, but not as nice. And we have to go to the store and buy irregular clothes because that's all we could afford. And I used to joke with my mother. She'd say, "Did you get those underwear or pants?" And I said, "Yeah, Mom, but it's missing a leg." So we would joke around. But she did fantastic. She raised 4 children on what was around, her maximum salary is $12,000 a year. So that was amazing. So luckily I was in New York and public school was free at that time. So I went to the public school system, went to college, and actually I wanted nothing more to do than to be a police officer. So I actually went to criminal justice college for 2.5 years. I was at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, a great place, a great school, doing very well today. But something kept bugging me. Something kept gnawing at me, saying that, yeah, you like this, but it's just not where you need to be. And I think that some people's fate is already determined already. I believe in that. I believe that there's a plan in your life. I've lived by that most of my life. And so most of your grief comes from when you resist that plan. So people do have things, I think, that are set down for them to a certain degree. So for me, even though I love criminal justice, I knew it wasn't right. And then in order to go back and do pre-medical courses, it just added another year to college. Luckily, I graduated high school when I was 16, so I had that year to make up, but it was tough. My summers were gone. But I said to my mother, I said, I'm not gonna be able to work much at all while I'm going and going to trying to be a doctor, trying to get into med school. And there's no guarantee that you get into med school. Okay. You do your best. You compete with all the other students who are a few years younger than I was, and then you hope to get into med school. You try your best. And a lot of that has to do with your grades, your testing, things like that.
And it's a selection process?
Yes, it is. And so what happens is a committee looks at you, looks at your grades, looks at your schooling and your test scores for your MCATs, they call them, your medical exam, like you take to get into law school, and they decide if they want to give you an interview. Then you get the interview and there's no guarantee you're going to get accepted.
And is it true that you select your top, say, 5 or 10 areas that you would like to work?
Sure. And for medical school, basically, I applied to as many medical schools as I could, and so we can get in. And my mom, of course, is helping me, giving the money, and I worked a little bit on the weekends, but I couldn't work too much. I had to study. I literally had to study. Some of my friends are born geniuses, but I'm not like that. I really had to work hard to get the good grades and work on that. So luckily I got into around 7 medical schools. I actually had an interview at Harvard Medical School. I couldn't believe it. And I got the letter. I keep the letter to today to show my children. They don't believe it. I didn't get into Harvard.
But you got the letter.
But I had the letter.
That's right.
So that was pretty cool to get that. And just to get there, get an interview there. And when I interviewed there, I almost felt like I didn't belong. I come from a very blue collar family, and nowadays things have changed, of course. So then I got into medical school, and I chose to go to medical school in Syracuse. Close enough to my family. My family's very small, but then again far enough away that I could sort of develop on my own. I didn't realize how cold it was going to be up there and how much snow there was going to be, but it turned out well. Then after that I chose to become an obstetrician-gynecologist. I had to do a residency. I did that in Connecticut, and that was a great experience. Very, very stressful. More stressful, I think, back then than it is today because we didn't have the rules.
And can you just walk us through first on how do you go through a selection process to even determine what specialty to go into?
Well, you have to know who you are. I knew that I was a mechanic. I loved to take things apart when I was a child, and I couldn't get them always back together again, but I just loved to do things like that. So I knew I wanted to do something surgical. And I think some people struggle. They don't know what kind of area they wanted to go into. So originally my dream was to be a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. And then when they told me it was like 15 years just for the training, I'm like, what? So I turned out to be an obstetrician-gynecologist. So what you do while you're in medical school, you get a chance to look at the different areas of medicine, and then hopefully you say one day, wow, I really enjoy this. I really like doing this, because you'd like to do a job that you enjoy doing, right?
Right.
You'd hate to be stuck in a job every day that you hate to go to. So when I was doing my rotations, I really enjoyed working in surgery, yet when I worked with women, I was able to do office work at the same time. You know, see them as patients. With general surgeons or orthopedic surgeons, may see the patient just once and never see them again.
Okay.
And so for me, I wanted some lasting relationship with my patients. I think that's really important for a person to develop a relationship with their physician. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes I just see people now for consults. So then while you're in medical school, you choose that, and then you choose basically where in the country you would like to train or live. And for me, I applied to a lot of different residency programs, and then I went interviewed there. I was lucky enough to work at the place for 4 weeks or be there as a student that I finally got accepted to. And then when you go to interview at these different programs, they then select you. They say, I think this person's going to fit in our program. I think this person's going to do well. And then you train for a number of years after that, depending upon what you choose, anywhere from 3 years to 5 years to 7 years, depending upon what you choose to do. Then after that process goes, people start looking for you. They start calling headhunters. Mm-hmm. So here I'm in my last year of residency, and people are calling me daily. Do you want to work in New York? Do you want to work in Alabama? Do you want to work in Florida? Do you want to work in... Because it's such a desperate need for doctors around this country. It's unbelievable. It's getting
continues.
Worse. What's that?
And that trend continues today.
The trend is getting worse. We won't have enough doctors. We don't have enough doctors here where I live now, where we live in Binghamton. We don't have enough doctors, but it's just getting worse and worse. They estimated that we'll be shy some 55,000 doctors in the year 2020. Wow. And it's just horrible. And so how do you bring all these doctors? How do you encourage people to go into medicine these days? Yeah. It's different. So then afterwards, basically, you choose where you want to live, where the job. You interview for some jobs and you say, yeah, that sounds great. I really want to live there. This is a great community. I want to go there. So when I got a phone call to come back to Binghamton, I had spent a year here as a medical student.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the place. And there was a desperate need at the time. A lot of docs in Binghamton when I came were older. Mm-hmm. They were practicing older techniques. When we came here, I would say Binghamton was 10 years back from the rest of the country. And so I came here with another doctor that I had trained with. We had actually spent some time here together. So we said to each other, look, we're really going to work hard. We're going to bring new things here as obstetricians-gynecologists and see if we can't get Binghamton up to speed. And it worked out that way.
And that's a great feeling, right? To be able to go to an area that you know is somewhat depressed and in need of this, and then actually having a vision for that and seeing it through.
I think every human being has to have motivation, and everybody's motivation is different. And for me, something always eats at me. I need to do something new. I just can't settle down and be happy and be still. I can't do that. Right. So I'm always looking for something new. I'm always looking to try something new. So when Binghamton called, things were wide open. And eventually, being in Binghamton is what led me to do what I do now and meet my wife, have my family. You know, it's amazing how certain things fall together and come together. Right. And people say to me, if you had to go back, would you do that all over again? And I go, well, if I didn't, I wouldn't have what I have now, or I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I have now.
Right, right, right. So earlier you mentioned the word commitment. And
right.
I don't know if I definitely don't understand that level of commitment, so I'd love if you could just walk us through really what that, from the day you said, I want to be a doctor, until it actually came to be, and then the hard work, begins. But what is that commitment level like?
It's very hard to describe. So for me, I knew that I had to do things on my own. We just didn't have money. So I would say to my mother, I need a car. And she'd say, that sounds great. Go ahead and get one. But she actually had no money to give me, so I had to work all summer just to save for that. And so I use that as an example because when you're hungry for something, when you can't get it any other way, you'll do whatever you need to do to get that. And for me, I had to work all summer and save almost every penny to just basically buy a used car and then afford the insurance on that. Right. And so you get the most basic of cars. I had a stick shift, which I love to this day, my first car. And so when you look and you want to become a doctor, You know, some people say, hey, if I can't become a doctor, I'll do this or I'll do that. For me, once you make that commitment, sort of like my son, I'll discuss that with you later, when he decided he wanted to go to Naval Academy. So what happens is that you set your sights straight ahead and nothing can get in your way. Not that you're going to go into roadblocks. And when you hit roadblocks, you can either go through them, over them, or around them. And everything's a challenge. Like for example, when you have a commitment to go pre-medical, you cannot get poor grades. You just can't.
It's not an option.
No, it's not an option. So for me, a B+, for some people, oh my God, it's great. But for me, a B+ is a disaster because it drops your GPA. So for me, I had to study and study and study and study and overstudy. So there'd be days where I'd be studying in my room at home by myself, and my friends would be calling me and say, let's go out, let's go have some fun, let's go to a party, let's go do this. And I'd say, I can't. I got a test coming up Monday. And I was competing with other students that were 3 years younger than me, that were fresh out of high school, that were geared up to do that. I was studying criminal justice 2.5 years.
Right.
So once you sit down and you commit to studying and to becoming a doctor or whatever you want to be, an FBI agent, criminal justice, a lawyer, you focus, your whole life focuses on that. And it's really hard. At that time, I didn't have a steady girlfriend. I wasn't married. So for me, it was a little easier to do that. But I had the support of my family. My mother would say, whatever you want to do, I'll support you, whether it be criminal justice or whatever it was. So that was very helpful. So a lot of commitment, a lot of studying, a lot of understanding that there'll be disappointments along the way. And when you fail a test, or I never failed a test, but when you don't do as well in a test, I think I failed one test, but when you don't do as well, you go to your professor, you go to your teacher, and you say, what can I do to make this better the next time? And it's amazing how many teachers say that people don't do well, they never come for help. They never ask.
Yeah. And that's a good life lesson, even for young people out there.
For anything.
I had a discussion with my daughter this week, and we had a meeting at the school. And it's the matter of taking that initiative to go in to the teacher, professor, and letting them know, I need help. What do I need to do? And it
Exactly.
works. It works.
And you'll make mistakes. I mean, I still say stupid things. And I still do stupid things. And not as many as I used to, but you need to look back at that and say, okay, what did I do wrong? And how can I make that better the next time? And I think what people don't realize is the value of mentors.
Yes.
People that basically would love to help you, you're afraid to approach, but if you just ask them, they'll help you. For example, when I first started speaking, I really wasn't that good. And I'm not where I want to be yet today. But for me, the key thing was I watched other people that were great speakers, and I said, what does that person have that makes them great? And then when I did my first speaking in front of a bunch of surgeons, I called a guy that I had just known, and he's a great speaker, and I said, I'm really nervous. Can you give me some advice? And he said, absolutely. He said, just understand that when I started out, I felt just like you. And remember that most of the people in your audience, they don't know as much as you do. But there will be some people that do or know more. And there's always characters. And so there's actual techniques about speaking and teaching that you can learn.
Yeah. And it's, you have to put your pride aside, and you have to be
Exactly.
humble, right? In anything.
Yes. And for me, and I know we're jumping ahead, but for me, teaching is something that I knew I was destined to do. It was something I was committed to do. And then I think, I've seen students drop out of, getting back to our subject, I've seen students drop out of medical school. I had one, I tried to convince her to stay. She'd be in the hallway crying, and I just can't take the stress of these exams, because in medical school is nothing like college.
Mm-hmm.
You go through high school, then you do 4 years of college studying, and then when you get to medical school, you're all in, because now your family, they love you being in medical school. You're going to be a doctor. You've tried so hard. You got accepted. And very few people fall out of medical school, in American medical school. Very few people. And so the studying, if you thought you studied hard in college, you have no clue. Because medical school was 10 times harder than college.
And in addition to that, are you actually in the hospital at this point? Shadowing?
Not the first year.
Not the first year. Okay.
In the first year, it's all about basic sciences,
Okay.
doing anatomy, learning the basics of chemistry, the body, human body, and things like that. Then in the second year, you get some small exposure to patient contact, so they ease you on in. And then the third and fourth year is all about, of medical school, is usually 4 years in the United States. And then the third and fourth year, it's all about basically you're being in contact with patients, examining patients, interviewing them and things like that. And then in your fourth year, you get more responsibility.
And I've always been fascinated with the level of knowledge that doctors have in general. And you talk about the commitment to studying. But it's just interesting, when you go in, you don't know much, right? You went through 4 years of med school, or of college, and now you're in med school.
Exactly.
Is it memorization? Is it, you mentioned that you weren't top of your class, and so you had to work extra hard. How do you remember all the terms, all the, different diseases? How does that's how powerful our brain is, I guess.
Sure. Well, it's like anything. As for example, you can't have an Olympic athlete that doesn't train every day. And you can't have a singer that doesn't practice every day or doesn't practice constantly to sing. I would, if I came back in my next life, I'd love to be an entertainer or a singer. I'd love to be that. And some people have a gift. And then the hardest thing I think for people and for children these days is to find their gift. And so not everyone that's a doctor should be a doctor. They choose to be a doctor because they're smart, they get in because they're smart, but they're not necessarily the best surgeon, they're not necessarily the best person to interact with their patients. But you train yourself, and I think that's the purpose of medical school and pre-med. You train yourself to learn how to take knowledge in on a rapid basis and process it. And then later on, like now medicine's like, I'm in my office and I'll be giving a patient medicine and she'll say, gee, can I take this medicine? And I'll say, hang on a second. I reach for my iPhone and I pull it out and it gives me all the interactions right in front of the patient. Where in the old days, I'd say, hang on a second, come in with a big book. Okay, so now the medical students, they study mostly on their iPads. And they look at podcasts, they look at videos, and that's why for me videos are important when I do my surgeries, because that's now one of the ways I teach. There's so many different tools to teach.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and some people teach from doing and touching, and some people teach from reading. I don't learn from reading.
I see.
I learn from seeing. My brain is right-sided. My brain is touching, seeing, and doing. That's how I learn, and that's how most surgeons learn.
Mm-hmm. So why do you do what you do? I mean, from a emotional and, why?
Well, I do many things. And, every person has different roles. A father, a husband, a family person, a surgeon, a counselor, a teacher. For me, I don't like the 9-to-5 desk job. I like to be up, move around. That's my nature. I was always a hyperactive child. And it was horrible. For a hyperactive child these days, or back those days, everybody thought it was a disease. Everybody thought it was basically, your child needs to be disciplined more. But my body doesn't like to sit still. And when I was in grade school, you sit in the class for 3 hours while the teachers change. And it was horrible for me. And then when you get into high school, middle school, high school, you change every 45 minutes, which is great for me. Right. In college, you do what you do. In med school, a lot of classes, you can come in and out of the classroom if you need to and stuff like that. I always sat in the back so I can go out, get a coffee, come back in. That's just my nature.
Right.
And so for me, I do what I do because I like doing different things, and I like seeing results. I'm a result person. I like to see something right away. I'm an immediate result person. So for me, operating, being a surgeon, seeing a patient, meeting them, discussing things with them, getting things done, getting things finished, teaching, getting things over, for me, that's my nature, and that's my passion. And when you try to change that, like if they put me in a 9-to-5 job sitting at a desk, I'm done. Your body energy will be gone.
Right.
And you have to figure out what makes you go every day, what keeps you going. And when, my mother died when she was 90. She was an amazing woman, and until that time, she did the treadmill every day at 1 mile an hour. I couldn't get my treadmill to go 1 mile an hour. It creaks and cranks. And so, but when she, fell and got injured, and I remember her saying to me, I don't want to live like this anymore. I can't do this. It's not me. And I totally understood what she was talking about, because I knew her constantly on the move, constantly doing something. And then when her time came, she said, I don't want to do this. It's not me, I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
So that means a lot. So I think that when you say, why do I do what I do, is because I'm driven from something inside. I can't explain what that is. Maybe it's God saying, this is what you need to do, so don't resist it, just go do it.
Right. I mean, are there days, it's hard for a doctor to have a bad day, right?
Yeah.
Are there
Oh,
days,
yeah.
do you have, like
Oh,
all
yeah.
of us, bad days?
Oh yeah, doctors have bad days, and you know, you have to be an actor or an actress, and we all have bad days. And I think somebody once taught me, and I don't remember who it was, one of my mentors said, look, you know, you're gonna have a bad day, and basically the next day may not be bad. And so the strength comes when you have a bad day, then know that the next day may be better or even outrageously fantastic. And so it's hard for people that are in severe depression to realize that just because you're having a bad day today doesn't mean you're going to have a bad one tomorrow. But the key to having a bad day is to say, okay, there's nothing I can do about it. It is what it is. And try not to take it out on everybody else.
Right.
Because people do.
Yeah.
And then people that know me well say, you're having a bad day? Like, what happened this morning? You know, I got up, the car was out of gas, or the boys left the lights on the car, the battery's dead, I got to get to work, you know, or something like that, or the phone was ringing all night, or they were calling me from the emergency room all night. Yeah, you have bad days. Or things just don't go the way you thought they would go.
What's the feeling like to help another human being?
It's very powerful, and it's not like you see in the movies where you see on ER where you cardiovert somebody, or you pull a knife out of their chest and save their life. It's in small increments. And I think what comes back to me is when I get a letter in the mail and I'm having a bad day and I open up a letter. It's almost like, okay, God's holding the letter in the mail, and then you're having a bad day, and then all of a sudden you open this letter and it's a patient saying how wonderful you were, you know, how you changed their life, how you affected their life. And so it's very powerful. And you know, you sort of get used to it, which is not a good thing. Because you start doing all these things all the time, and then that's just what you do until you step back, until some woman in the store runs up to you in Target or whatever you are, what store you're at, or Wegmans, and my wife's next to me. Oh, this is the guy that's responsible for you. You know, this is the doctor that gave my baby. And my wife understands what these things mean now. And so it makes you feel really powerful. And to see that you've helped somebody, or there are times where a patient is really in bad shape, and you come in and you save the day. And that's what led me to do a lot of my speaking on genetics now, which we'll talk about eventually, but it's a very powerful feeling, very, very powerful.
And isn't that why we're here? To help others?
Totally.
Yeah.
It really is. And there was a movie called, is it Pay It Forward? I love that movie.
Yes, I love that movie.
And I don't like the ending of the movie, but I love the movie. But I think that I remember one day, my son and I, my wife and my children and I, we were down in New York City. And we were basically shopping, Christmas time and stuff like that. It started raining. And so the guys were on the corner selling umbrellas. And I was with my son, I think it might have been Gavin or Peter, I forgot who it was. And so we were sitting there, and standing there when it was raining, so of course you can buy an umbrella for $5 from the guys on the street, right? So I said to my son, this is what we're going to do. So I went over and I said to the guy, here's $20 cash, but I want 5 umbrellas. He goes, no, it's a $5 an umbrella, so you get 4 umbrellas. I said, well, here's $40 cash, give me 10 umbrellas. You're not going to sell 10 umbrellas in the next half hour. And the guy says, okay. So we gave him $20 cash, and we just started handing umbrellas out to people that didn't have umbrellas. And my son says, what are you doing? I said, I got $20. When I was your age, I didn't have $20. And the guy in the corner, the umbrella guy, is like looking at me like, you're taking away my business. I said, don't worry, I'll come back for some more umbrellas. And so the guy that was poor, sitting on the corner, selling the umbrellas, what do you think the guy's gonna make in a day?
Right.
A couple of bucks?
Right.
He made some money.
Yep.
People walking by from different countries, caught in the rain.
And a great lesson
They
for
got
your
an umbrella, and I said to my son, how do you feel? He says, it feels great. But some people wouldn't take an umbrella. They thought something was attached to it, like, you know. I said, here, take the umbrella. And I'm like, it's okay, take the umbrella. It's all right to do that. But, you know, things like that, you know, they always help people if you can.
Yeah. I've been trying for the past several years to try to do something nice for someone every day. It's hard. I mean, when you get caught up, I mean, for you it's a little bit easier because you're in the field of helping
people. I see a lot of people that don't have any insurance lately, so
right.
it's easy to do that.
Yeah, but even, you know, even if it's even if I receive a message for American Real and reach back out to people, people love that.
Well, sending a message out to other people, the people that you interview that send messages to other people, you don't realize how lonely people are in this world today.
That's right.
And you never know when you're going to touch somebody. And as my wife used to say to me, I would go to a lecture and only be 4 people there. And I'd say, we did all this advertising, we did this, we did that, and only 4 people showed up. My wife would go, but maybe you'll help 1 person.
She's right.
Yeah, so I always look at it that way. I'd lecture in front of 4 people or 1,000 people.
Yeah.
You never know.
Right. So let's talk about your work.
Sure.
Tell us, in some detail, what does it involve?
Okay, so when you look back, basically at what I did when I first came to Binghamton, I was doing a lot of obstetrics and gynecology. There was a huge need here. And we had bought a practice from somebody. We worked at a couple of hospitals here in town. And then there was a tremendous need for something called infertility or fertility. And for some reason, remember how I told you I had as a plan? For some reason, when I was in residency, the fertility specialist took a liking to me, and none of the senior residents wanted to do fertility. And I had a great interest in it, helping people who couldn't get pregnant get pregnant. And in Binghamton, there was like nobody around doing that. So when I started doing that, I was overwhelmed with all these patients. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so my mentor back in Connecticut, I would call him all the time and I'd say, how do I do this? How do I do that? And he says, let's do this and that. So we actually, in 1990, I was sitting at a conference in New York City, and I was sitting next to one of the biggest fertility specialists in Boston, and I didn't know it. Average guy, and most people that are famous, that are rich, that are, really well known, they're average guys. Mm-hmm. They're just great, whatever, it turned out for them. And a lot of them are really friendly people. They're just very cautious, but they're very friendly people. And so he sat next to me and I says, what do you do for your fertility people? And I go, well, I do this and that. He says, well, when they need in vitro, what do you do? And I go, well, we send them to New York City 3 hours away. He goes, well, why don't we build something together? He's in Boston, I'm in Binghamton. So in 1990, we established only the 3rd satellite in vitro program in the country. The other one was in Seattle, Washington. The other was in North Carolina. Wow. So people would get stimulated here, and then they would travel to Boston and get their in vitro there. Now, of course, things are local. Mm-hmm. So when I started doing that, there was a greater need for surgery because a lot of these patients had anatomical problems, endometriosis, things like that. I was so busy doing surgery and learning new techniques, I couldn't do deliveries anymore. Wow. So in about 1992, I stopped doing deliveries. It was a tough decision. But I was so busy doing surgery that I had to do that. And then over the years, basically, we started learning how to do what's called minimally invasive surgery. Back then, it was called belly button surgery or laparoscopic surgery. Yeah, it wasn't called that. Right. So I had to go get training because there was no YouTube. There was no flash drives back then. This was early 90s, right? So I had to go to different places to learn the different techniques. Then I had to convince the hospital to buy the equipment that we needed to do these techniques. So we went from a hospital, an area in Binghamton here where we were doing, I would say, 95% open cut surgeries, right? To now we're doing 98% minimally invasive, tiny little hole surgeries.
So all your risks go down.
Yes, a lot of risks go down. The patient recovery goes, is quicker. Pain is less.
Success rate better?
It depends on what you're doing. Yeah,
okay.
Complications can be lower, mm-hmm. but scars, mm-hmm. pain, things like that. Yeah. People now, there's a lot of single moms. There's a lot of moms that are working, and they can't be out 6 to 8 weeks having a big cut surgery. So what happened, I saw an opportunity, and basically it just escalated from there in different training, and then I got a lucky break one day. And like I said to you before earlier, things happen for a reason. A door opens, it's up to you whether you're going to step through that door. And the thing that keeps people from stepping through that door is fear, right?
Yes.
So opportunities come, you're afraid of something, a past event in your life keeps you from taking a chance, whatever it is. And there's been times in my life, and not as many anymore, where I go back and I say, I should have did that, or I should have took that chance. So what happened for me was one day I was doing surgery, and one of the equipment reps came to me and said, look, one of our speakers hurt his back really bad and can't speak Friday, and we have people flying in from different countries. There's any chance I know it's only 2 days from now, but there's any chance that you can come speak for us? And I'm like, okay. So yeah, I'll give it a try. So this was about teaching a technique that I had been doing for several years that they thought I did well. So I said, well, okay, what do I do? I've never spoke before, you know, what do I do for video things? And back then we didn't have flash drives, we didn't have that sort of thing. So I had VHS tapes of my surgeries. So what I had to do is I'd stay up hours and hours, and I had to put all of my VHS tapes at the spot where I was going to slip them into the machine and then play them. So I had to go back and put them right where they were. I didn't have any fancy editing material. I'm a surgeon.
But you made it work.
But I made it work. And the key thing is speak on what you know, learn techniques. Of course, the first speaking event was a little on the rough side, but it worked, and it worked out well. None of the tapes snapped. And I think that was it. Then after that, people approached me and said, you know, you did a great job. Do you want to do this on a regular basis? And then I was picked up by other people, other companies, and they would say, you know, we heard about you, we saw you speak, or whatever it is.
Just snowballed.
And snowball after that. Then I got another lucky break. So that was my first break on speaking, and I enjoyed that. And then I got another lucky break where I was starting to use a brand new instrument. How I got involved, oh, I know what it is. I once said to the rep, look, I'm hungry. I like new things. Anything new comes out, I want to be one of the first people to try it. Even if it's a disaster, I want to try it. So they called me and said, we have a new instrument. You're doing a lot of laparoscopic surgery. You're doing a lot of minimally invasive surgery. Do you want to try it? I go, I'm there. So I think I was one of the first groups of surgeons in the world to get trained on its instrument. And as it turned out, I loved it. And I said, I love this instrument, and our team is going to teach the company all the things that they don't know the instrument can do. So then I got a phone call, and they said, well, we want you to come to Europe and teach at our European Institute. But all the people you're going to teach are from different countries from around the world. They're all the lead reps of that. And I said, well, you do that? I'm like, I'm there. So that was my first real trip, you know, overseas like that to do that. So then I got there, and I was teaching people from the Middle East, from South Africa, from Indonesia, China, all the different countries. So then I started getting emails. Could you come do surgery in our countries? Could you come teach our surgeons? Could you come do that? And I'm like, sure.
That's incredible.
And yeah.
It must have been so gratifying.
It was scary.
Yeah.
It wasn't gratifying until later.
Okay, but you talked about the fear, and you talk about breaking through that resistance. Again, life lesson, right? If you don't take that risk, if you didn't take that first speaking assignment, maybe none of this would have occurred, at least the way it did.
Exactly. If I didn't keep asking my wife out on a date constantly, she kept rejecting me. I don't know how long it took. My kids always joke, and they say, Mom, Dad says he kept asking you out until he wore you down. She said, yeah, I got so tired I finally had to say yes.
Right. Which
is kind of true to a certain degree, but I think that's true. And then, you know, I almost, on my first speaking engagement, my trip overseas, I almost said no. I almost canceled. I was up all night worried about it. And one of my first trips was to the Middle East.
What was that like?
It was very scary because I'd never been to the Middle East before. And so basically, I didn't know anything about the customs. And you hear all kinds of stories, oh, you're going to fly over there and they're going to cut your head off and stuff like that. At least my buddies kept saying that to me. I'm like, this is not helpful.
Right.
Could you please stop doing that? And so I would call the people, and they would say, you really, you have no idea what it's like here. You're going to be so surprised. And I think there were two things. One is lecturing in the Middle East, the customs, doing the right thing. I didn't want to do the wrong thing, because the customs are very different.
Sure.
So then I started saying to myself, if I'm going to a different country, I'm going to learn those customs of that country. I'm going to learn at least 10 basic words in their language. Because if you can connect with your audience no matter where they are in the world, that's really essential. And I learned so many speaking techniques. We could spend an hour talking about speaking techniques, interviewing techniques, things like that.
Can you give us an example of
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Okay, so my very first teaching was in Saudi Arabia. And never been to the Middle East. I had to get a visa and things like that. So I'm on a plane. I think I was on Middle East Airlines. I'm flying in from, I think it was Dubai into Saudi Arabia. And there's absolutely no alcohol allowed in Saudi Arabia. And, you know, there's a beer here and there, but so it was going to be a dry trip, which was actually better because my mind was totally clear. But as I'm sitting there filling out the customs form on the plane, right in big letters it says death to drug traffickers, right in red letters. And I'm like, geez, I've never seen a customs form like this before. And in my bag is Tylenol, you know, some Advil, some Aleve, and I'm like, I wonder if that's included in
What do
there
they
or not.
consider drugs?
So
Right.
I'm sitting on the plane, and this guy's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm like, what, nervous, had to fill this out." He turned out to be the Minister of Energy, and I'm like, so we're shooting the breeze. Nice guy, talked for a while, and so I get to the Middle East, and this guy greets me, and turns out to be one of my best friends now. Great guy,
Okay.
really good friend. I think the scary part for me was, speaking in front of the audience, but then doing surgery in a foreign country. That's a whole different thing. So my first speaking engagement was at a women's hospital. And it was in front of, I think, an audience of 100 people, all had burqas on, burqas. All the women had the full dress on. And the men had their tobes, their robes on and everything. And my guide said to me, now remember, don't touch the women, don't shake their hand. You just basically, you can speak to them, but don't, and the men, you shake their hand, you give them a kiss. And the hardest part was remembering, is it left side first or right side? Because if you don't know which side you're going for, you might, kiss in the middle. You don't want to do that. Right. So each country is, some are 3 kisses, some are 2 kisses, and men in Saudi Arabia, in the Middle East, you greet by kissing the cheek. You go, and in other countries it's 3 times and stuff like that. So for me, I had my laptop, and I had to hand it to one of the women, and I couldn't touch her hand, so I was trying to be extra cautious. So I get up in front of the audience, and I'm so nervous, and I'm nervous of 2 things. One is I don't want to say the wrong things, and the other thing that I'm very nervous about is that your technology will dive on you. All speakers have that problem, but I've got that pretty much solved now. But all people think that your technology will crash on you, and then you're speaking on your own. So the first thing I said as I got up there, and they introduced me, and I said, Assalamu alaikum. I said, Sabah al-khair. And the whole audience clapped and went, outrageous. And so my rep looks at me and goes, how'd you know that? Well, you go on, online. I've asked people on the plane, people, the people that are serving you on the plane to say, how do you say good morning? Right. And what do you say? How do you greet somebody? What's the proper way to greet somebody? And then once you have the audience after that, it's great, and they appreciate that. And so I gave the lecture, it went well, and afterwards, one of the chief people said to me, your lecture was amazing because usually we get some of the other foreign people and they talk down to us. They talk, in their language, and they don't make any attempt to understand our customs and things like that. And so that was amazing.
Yeah, and it's those little, the extra effort that you give anyone, again, it's a great life lesson.
Makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah. And it sounds like the welcome was, you were well received there.
And worked out great.
And were you asked to come back?
Yeah, I've been back to Saudi Arabia like 6 times. Wow. Yeah. So I've been all the different countries in the Middle East and many countries around the world.
Do you respect their customs? Not that you don't respect them, but do you respect that that's the way it is there? Or do you wish it was more Western?
Well, you have to respect another country's customs. It's not your country.
That's right.
Americans generally think that everybody in the world should be like Americans. And so they often try to instill those customs, on those other people. But I think what you need to understand is I don't always agree with their customs from a lot of different angles, morally or whatever it is, but you have to respect their customs, no matter what they are. And I think that that's really important, and they appreciate that. Absolutely. They really do appreciate that. And from a surgeon, it's important for me to, women around the world are the same no matter where you are. Surgeons around the world, they struggle just like every other surgeon. And some of the surgeons in different countries are actually better surgeons than American surgeons because they work with much less. And they get paid much less. Right. And they work so many long hours. And I feel for those people. And for me, it's very important that I can even teach them 1 or 2 things. But I teach them more than that, hopefully. But if I can teach them 1 or 2 things, that's important. And I learned something when I travel from surgeons in other countries also. Yeah.
I was going to ask you the difference between, the U.S. and other areas abroad. And actually, I wanted to know, who do you think has the best medicine for all the places that you've been outside of the U.S.?
Who has the best medicine outside the U.S.?
In Germany?
I think it's pockets. It is so hard to tell. I think it has to do with surgeons. I think who's the best surgeon? Who's a good surgeon? I think it has to do with the hospital, what facilities they have. Like I've been in countries where, for example, I was in Lebanon, and I did surgery in Lebanon, and I was at this one hospital, and I said, "It's amazing." The surgeon was amazing, and the equipment they had was better than some of the stuff that I had, and I'm like, "This is great." And when then you go to another hospital, and they don't have nearly as good stuff, and the surgeons, are they a bad surgeon, or was the surgeon not trained well?
Right.
Sometimes, most of the times, they're not trained well. I was in the Philippines, and I love going to the Philippines because they just love you. And they're such lovely people. And they're so hungry to learn. But when I learned what their residents were getting for training, it was pretty sad. Like, for example, a resident could graduate and never do a laparoscopy, never do a small hole surgery. And I was like, why? Well, we need more funding. We need people to come teach them. Don't forget, in order to teach somebody something, you have to have a person that knows how to do that.
Right.
And that's where teachers are so important to do that.
And are you still doing this today?
Yes, I still teach a lot. Now, we do some webcasting now, webcast. A lot of my videos, they're seen by people all over the world. And I get feedback all the time, and it's really, that's what keeps me going. Because making a good video, I could throw up a surgery on there for 2 hours, and no one's going to watch that for 2 hours. When you edit a video to show the fine points and things like that, that takes hours to do that. And you don't get paid to do that.
Right.
But
it's important.
It's important. Yes. Oh my God, it's important. But I do travel. Education has cut back for many reasons. The finances of the world. The government has put so many rules and regulations on industry now. It's outrageous that they're afraid to make a move. They're taxed on all the equipment now. So they cut back on their education a lot. And sometimes I'll teach surgeons that come from other countries. Next month I'll be in Cincinnati teaching 10 surgeons from Brazil, as opposed to me going to Brazil. I've been to Brazil 3 times.
Okay.
So they'll bring them here for many reasons. So I miss teaching abroad. I do. I miss teaching out of the country. I still do a lot of teaching locally. And some of my teaching has moved towards genetic teaching, genetics and testing, as opposed to just doing surgery, even though I still do a lot of surgical teaching.
I see. So can we talk about your YouTube channel?
Sure. So my YouTube channel's a mess because I don't know what I'm doing. And so someone said to me, "Why don't you put some of your surgical videos on YouTube?" And I go, "How do you do that?" "Well, first you got to sign into YouTube, you got to sign up." And I go, "Okay, now what do I do?" "Well, then you got to upload." And it's funny because then you can put titles on it and what you describe what it's about, and you put it on. And I had this discussion before that at one of my videos had like, what, 400,000?
Yes.
And I'm like, I said, "Is that good?"
Right.
And you looked at me and said, "That's incredible." And I go, "Okay." And then I went back and I said, "Wow, a lot of people looked at this video." I only got like 2 thumbs down at a 400,000, which I guess is pretty good, right?
That's great.
And then I looked at my other videos, 10,000, 40,000, 5,000, 6,000. And I'm like, "Is that good?" And then you said to me, "How many followers do you have?" And I go, "I haven't a clue." And then you said, "Well,
it was a few thousand.
Let me go look and see."
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize, and it's funny because it wasn't until I went to London to teach that, and we had spoke before that, and I got to London, and a doc came up to me and they said, "Man, what's going on? We need more videos." I go, "What do you mean?" He said, "We use those to teach our residents. Why don't you make some more?" And I go, "Oh, I didn't know that." And so I didn't realize the impact that it had.
Yeah.
Until people approach you and say, "This is very impactful." So I've got a lot more to put out there, but I have other things going on in my life.
Sure. Well, American Real wants to help you, so
yeah,
we'll talk
I appreciate
about
that.
Let's talk about some of the conditions in the different areas around the world. What's the worst? I mean, we talked about some of the good.
Sure.
Anything?
I think for me, going into a hospital where I'm going to do surgery, and that's what they ask me to do a lot when I travel overseas, is to do a live surgery and demonstrate things. And just when I think I've done the hardest surgery, or just when I think it's a difficult situation, something else comes up. So I think in the early days, going to some of the Middle Eastern countries were a little difficult because the nurses, the people that helped you, didn't speak English. You didn't have your team.
So you're really operating alone.
Operating alone, exactly. Well, you have another surgeon, and you just pray and hope that surgeon has good hands and follows you and knows how to work with you. And I brought my own equipment with me.
And explain to us, so you're in the midst of this, what do you need? What do you need help with? Is it you need another instrument? Is it what? You need a clamp? What are some of the...
Well, all surgeries are live surgeries. You can't go back and edit them later on. And sometimes I had an audience of maybe 8 surgeons, sometimes 30 in the room with me, and then sometimes a couple of hundred. And so basically, you're going to go in and operate on a woman you've never met before. You don't know what her anatomy looks like. You don't know what things look like inside until you actually put the scope in, the telescope in, and look inside and see that. And then you're expected to do like a hysterectomy or remove a cyst or something like an ovarian cyst or something. And so some surgeries are very challenging. So I need different clamps, different energy instruments, different things to make my surgery go smoother. And I used to bring 2 sets with me. So I'd bring one in one suitcase and one in the other suitcase. And then after 9/11, it was difficult to carry things with me because they didn't want anything sharp. So I would really bring my expensive things, like one instrument might cost several $1,000s. So I would carry with me $10,000 worth of instruments just in my backpack or my carry-on bag. And some of the people would say, you can't do that. It's too sharp or whatever, so I'd have to show my doctor ID or whatever. But then I get to a surgery and be doing surgery in a foreign country and hope that I had some of the things I needed and a surgeon that could assist me during a difficult case. So some of those cases were very difficult. I remember I did a surgery in Syria once, just before things happened. So I didn't meet the patient. I finally met her and went upstairs. She spoke no English. I was doing a hysterectomy on her. As it turned out, it was the first laparoscopic hysterectomy ever done in that hospital. And so I said to the people, I said, who's going to help me do the surgery? And they go, well, we don't know. And so they had to dig up a surgeon, a general surgeon, to help me. Turned out the guy was amazing. And the equipment that we had was very, very primitive. The TV I was doing the surgery on was like a regular small little TV. The suction bottle for the anesthesia was one with the little ball that bounces around in it. And the surgery went amazing. Wow. But it was in the 2nd level down basement, the 2nd basement level. And here I am in Syria, myself and the rep, and doing surgery on someone. And the temperature was 110 degrees. And I was wearing a cloth gown.
Even in the basement? Even
in the basement. And I said, could you turn the temperature down a little bit? And they were like, well, we only have one thermostat that controls all 5 floors of the hospital, so we really can't turn that thermostat. I said, I'll be fine, thank you. So the surgery went great, but to get to Syria, we had to travel from Lebanon over the mountains through Lebanon down into Syria and go through a lot of different roadblocks and things like that. And there's what's called the neutral zone of 10 miles, and it was pretty scary. It was pretty scary.
How long ago was that?
That was just before the Arab Spring, so quite a while ago. Okay. Maybe we're looking at 8 years now, 9 years, something. I lost the exact date that it was. Mm-hmm. And then my last long trip overseas was Vietnam.
What was that like?
It was an experience. Well, first of all, you know, I get to Vietnam, and I think I landed in Hanoi and Saigon. I had Ho Chi Minh City and Saigon. Okay. And once again, I was expected to do some surgeries, but I didn't know anything about the facilities and stuff like that. So, but by this time, I was getting smart. So at this time, I recruited the company that also made the video systems to bring their stuff in. And they were so helpful. And the Vietnamese people were just wonderful to me. Wonderful. They greeted me like I was an amazing, you know, professor, surgeon. They were just amazing. And so I met the patients before surgery, and the conditions are getting better, but you know, you'd have 6 women in one room. Wow. And the surgery, basically, you'd have a backlog of dozens of surgeries for these surgeons because there just aren't enough surgeons to do the surgery. And they are so hungry to learn over there. They're wonderful people. And they're so hungry to learn new techniques. The young surgeons that are coming up, they just want to learn it so much. So our goal was to teach them laparoscopic hysterectomy through small little holes. That was our goal. And to show them the techniques that we do to keep complications down, but yet make it affordable so they can do it quickly and make it affordable for everybody.
And a hysterectomy is a removal of the uterus?
Yes, removal of the uterus, sometimes the ovaries, but it's just you remove the uterus, whatever disease it is. So we were so successful. So I did a surgery there, a live surgery in front of hundreds of people. So the rooms have different rules than they have in the United States. The room was packed. So I had people like bumping me while I'm doing the surgery. It was cool. I was used to it after that.
What an experience.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I had a microphone because everything's live, and they got cameras coming from all angles.
They probably have interpreters.
Yes, yes. and you don't want to screw up.
Right.
It wouldn't look good.
Right.
So the pressure's on you to do that. But you know, once you get started and you get focused, you just do what you normally do. And then you have to talk and explain to it. And you have to say what's on your mind, minus the curse words, of course. But you have to say what's on your mind so that people say, well, what's the surgeon thinking? I think people want to know, wow, these actors, these actresses, they're so cool, these singers, they're like, what do they really feel? What do they really do? And people say to me, what are you thinking when you see that situation? And I remember I was doing a surgery I was in Indonesia. At a small hospital that had beautiful equipment. I couldn't believe it. And so an artery got cut before I could coagulate it, and it was bleeding, you know, and that's okay, it happens. And so I heard somebody say, what's he gonna do now? And I had like so many people watching me. And so I said, well, this is how you handle this situation. We took care of it.
So you're thinking out loud.
Right,
So they
and if you have a beautiful, perfect surgery when you're teaching, people want to know, what do I do if I get into this situation? What do I do if I get into that situation?
Right.
So these were challenges for me that I had on the road.
Did you ever run into a major complication while
A major complication, no, but I ran into a major situation where basically the hospital was trying to tag on so many surgeries for me to do. And it wasn't turning into a teaching experience, it was turning into a working experience. And so when I looked around, I said, well, where's all the people I'm teaching? They're all gone home for the day, and I'm just doing this surgery. So there was some friction with that. And so in future cases, we said, well, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we need. So no complications like that.
And it probably just goes to show you the demand over there for this type of
Absolutely.
surgery. Yeah.
And it's still there. It's still a big demand there.
So what other passions do you have?
Well, you know, I'm working a lot. And I love speaking. I mean, you put me in front of anybody, I'll speak about anything. I just love speaking. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm nervous as all heck until we start. And then once you get going, you get going. And big audiences, I love big audiences. And you just, I remember sitting as a student at a conference and trying to stay awake, you know, sticking a pen in my arm, pinching myself. And I would say to myself, if I ever get a chance to talk in front of an audience, I will never do what that person does. I'll never search for my slides and my videos as if I didn't prepare. I'll never say the word all the time. I'll never read the slide to the audience. I won't do that. I want it to be fun. Teaching is a performance. It's something that you prepare for. You know your audience. You know what you're speaking on. You practice it. And then you hope that it flows. It doesn't always work. I've had times, all speakers have, where something goes wrong. But my passion is getting out. And now in women's healthcare, one of my biggest passions is empowering women. And that's not only in choosing their surgery types, their choices. You know, the old days of I go in, a doctor said, you need a hysterectomy, you need this, those are done for now. Women get on the internet, they research me before they come in. And they come in with information, and I love that. But I think the hereditary cancers is a big passion for me. I speak now all over the United States on hereditary cancers in women. Hereditary ovary cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer. And a lot of women carry a predisposition to these cancers, and they're being shortchanged.
Okay. So what does that mean? So
their doctors, whether they be family practitioners, surgeons, gynecologists, practitioners, a lot of women see nurse practitioners, physician's assistants. That's amazing. That's great. They're not being tested. They're not being asked the right questions. So if you don't ask the patient the right question about their family history, and you don't look to see if they carry a gene that gives them an 87% chance of a risk for breast cancer, you'll kill them.
Yeah.
So you know what the risk of breast cancer is now? Around 10% in the population. But you hear about it every day. Ribbons, marches, runs, 5K runs for breast cancer, right?
Right.
But it's only 10%. But if I told a woman you have an 87% chance of getting breast cancer, wow.
That changes,
So
yeah.
what's happening is too many women are not getting tested and they're getting cancer. And I have patients all the time. This year alone, I had 3 women who got breast cancer that should have had the testing for the gene,
And
like
where does that
Angelina Jolie.
Right. Where does that start, though? The family physician?
Starts at the visit.
The
No, either the gynecologist office or the family physician.
Okay.
Or the breast surgeon, depending upon who they see. And so a woman will come into me for her yearly checkup. Maybe she's 21 or 18, whatever it is. I'm obligated to say to her, is there any family history of cancer in your family? And if you don't do that, you don't test them, and they get ovarian cancer or they get breast cancer, you've killed them.
Yeah.
And so it's still happening, and it's still happening at such a great amount. Surgeons are overwhelmed, or they don't want to learn something new, or gynecologists, family practitioners, or practitioners. They're so overwhelmed.
So if they do say yes, then you're going through a whole different series of testing because
Easy.
it's
It's one
in the
blood
family,
test.
right?
So you come in and you say, my aunt had ovarian cancer, bing. I say, well, I think we should do a blood test to see if you carry the gene, just like Angelina Jolie carries for breast and ovarian cancer. And it's not just that, there's so many cancers now. And they go, yeah, I'd like to find out about that.
What if they say, I don't know? Are you going to be
They don't know if
proactive?
they want to be tested.
They don't know if there's any history in the family.
Well, then not much you can do.
Okay.
But a lot of women do know, or they'll find out.
Right.
And it's not just women. These genes are carried 50% by men
Really?
and 50% by women.
That
And
could
so,
be passed, so I could pass it on to my daughter.
exactly. I occasionally will test men, but I'm a gynecologist, so I see mostly women.
Right.
But so I go and I speak to teach practitioners, surgeons, obstetricians, general public, and I should do a podcast on that. Basically to let them know that if your surgeon or your gynecologist, your practitioner or your family doesn't ask you about your family history, ask them why.
Right. So you have to be your own advocate.
You do. In many things, especially in this area. This year alone, I saw, those women without cancer, and I had a woman several years ago that got ovarian cancer, and she carries the gene, and she never got tested. And I think just in general for women these days, you need to research. For example, it's not unlikely for me to see 2 women a month that their doctor said, oh, the only way I can do your surgery is to cut you open, or whether it be a bikini cut or an up and down cut. Then they'll come to see me and they'll say, well, my doctor said the only way, I want another opinion, and I get them from all over the state, sometimes out of state. My doctor said the only way you can do that surgery is to cut me open. I'm like, I don't think so. And I'm not God's gift, but I've had the training in that as a 99% chance I can do it without cutting you open.
Right.
Through small holes.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of training, but the surgeons aren't volunteering that to their patients.
I see.
And so the patients are assuming that's their only choice. So I think you have to be an advocate. Get your lab results yourself, get your records yourself. If you don't like something, get a second opinion.
Right. Right. What advice do you have for people in general, but especially women, because this is your field, that just are afraid to go to the doctor, or they know they should go in and it's been 5 years? What advice do you have? Because a lot of people they're intimidated. They don't want anything to be wrong.
I've been in practice 30 years. So when I look back at those patients that have gotten cancer, the majority of them got cancer or advanced cancer because they didn't go for their regular checkups. And that's not always that case, but that's generally the reason. Cervical cancer especially is one of the saddest things. Or cancer of the uterus where a woman has bleeding and just kind of, oh, it's probably okay. It doesn't hurt. And then you come in and their cancer is advanced. Or they went to a doctor and had a bad experience. They were treated poorly. And so they ignored the problem because they never want to go back to another doctor again.
Yeah.
And you have to get over that somehow, or look for another doctor. And go to somebody else if you're not happy with the person that you saw. I mean, I don't get along with every patient that I see. I mean, you put your own personal biases in, you have a bad day or something like that, or you just don't click with somebody, so go to somebody else. I mean, I'm happy with that. I send patients to other surgeons to do things that I can't do. So don't be afraid, because you're not only affecting yourself, but you're affecting your family,
Right.
your children, the people that love you, your friends. They don't want to see you die. They don't want to see you, could have done something that was preventable. Those are the saddest moments when something was preventable or easily curable. And now they let it go so far you can't do it.
And it is the difference between life and death, right? If you're not
Totally.
getting checked on a, annual basis? Is
Well, annual or semi-annual basis, or even when you have a problem. Now here, especially in Binghamton, it's access. Even if you want to go see a doctor, you can't. It's so sad. And you know, a lot of it has to do with many things in medicine, but you know, each state you're in has different rules and regulations that make it harder or easier or difficult.
So you talk about being your own advocate,
Sure.
and it's so important. Actually, when our daughter Alexis was born, she's now 15, she was born with a hemangioma on her eye.
Sure.
And it started to swell up, you know, to the size of a golf ball. And we took her into the pediatrician, and he said, it's okay, it'll go away. And we said, how long? And he said, about 10 years. So this is our first child. We didn't know what to do. We started, you know, calling friends that were doctors and whatnot. And that's when I realized you have to be your own advocate.
Have to be.
So had we not taken her out of this area to go to the surgeon that specializes in these hemangiomas, because they're high risk anyway, and then to have it, you know, on the eye or you know, in the eye, which hers was. So we found Dr. Milton Wayner, who was out of Arkansas. He transferred to New York, and he actually performed the surgery. So I've been through it firsthand, and I can only say that I you know, believe you 110%.
Sure.
And hope more people will become their own advocates, do the research, do the Google searches. So what percentage of people would you say that come in to see you are their own advocate?
You know, I'd say around 30%. And it's probably increasing because of social media. And you get a lot of bad advice on social media. Like I'll say, I think you should take this medicine. Oh, I saw that on Facebook and I'm not doing that. And I'm like, okay, but my personal experience is this might happen.
Right.
And so you'll be okay. But you know, we don't do everything here. We're a small city, but we do a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we do a lot of good things here, but we don't do everything here. And I think that you need to go to someone who does it a lot. For example, there was a movement back several years ago where they said basically, we don't want people to specialize anymore. We want everybody to do a little bit of everything. Okay, but then you're not the best at everything. But now it's coming back. So now what they're saying is, okay, say your surgeon does this surgery twice a year. Would you rather go to a surgeon that does it twice a day or does it twice a year? Because it's well known that the more you do something, the more situations you come into. That's why training, military training, mm-hmm. you do over and over, mm-hmm. police training over and over again, because each situation, you may never see it, but you might see it. So when you go to someone who only does something once in a while, like the hemangioma, you're not going to get also the updated advice or the experience. So some things are easy, tonsils, you know, maybe appendix, but some things are more involved. And when they're more involved, you need to go to a place that has access. You are lucky to be able to make calls. You are lucky to be able to travel. Some of my patients can't even travel. Some don't even have enough money for the co-pays, let alone get permission for their insurance companies to let them go out of the state or out of the city. Yeah. So, but you have to be your own advocate. You have to look after the different options that are open to you. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the military, I noticed your pin,
Thank you.
On your lapel. Tell us about your son.
Well, my oldest son, when he was in high school, early high school, he decided one day, my wife's family comes from a big military family. My father was Navy, my mother was Army, but my wife's family, admirals, commanders, lieutenant commanders, captains in the Navy, Marines, things like that. So she comes from a big Navy family. And for some reason, and I didn't push my son, one day he said, I want to be in the Navy. And we said, okay, that's great, no worries. He says, well, I'll do ROTC, Reserve Officer Training, but I want to go to the Naval Academy. And we had never been to the Naval Academy, so where he came up with that, I don't know. But he said, I want to go to Naval Academy.
Washington?
In Naples, Maryland.
Naples, right.
And I go, well, you know what it's like to get in there. It's like, they get like, there's only 1,000 slots, and the first thing you have to do is you have to get the nomination from your local representative or the president or the vice president, and I don't happen to know those guys personally, so, and I don't even know your local representative. So, and then you have to do well in school, and you have to be a well-rounded person. And so he said, I'm going to do it. So he kept studying very hard, did great on his SATs, his ACTs, his grades were amazing. But he also did things outside of high school, like, you know, helping other people and things like that, community stuff. And so then he got an interview for the nomination from a local representative, and he was interviewed by a panel of 12. And I had given him a couple pointers on what to say, what to do, and he took some of my advice, but thank goodness he didn't take all my advice. I said, dress very conservatively. Don't wear anything outrageous. And my wife's like, do whatever you want to do, don't listen to your father. So and I said, and think about what you're going to answer and stuff like that. So he wore these crazy socks. Talk about socks, right? Okay. So I love socks too, but he wore these crazy socks. And so during the interview, one of the people interviewing said to him, why did you wear those outrageous socks to this interview? And it was a panel of like 12 people, and he's sitting like in the middle. And he got nervous, and he goes, well, those are my lucky socks. I wear those when this and that. And she said, well, I agree with you because I'm a pilot, and I always wear my lucky socks when I go on a mission.
Great
Boom.
decision. Yeah.
And I didn't give that to him. He did that. But anyway, so I remember I was in Singapore. I was teaching when I got the phone call, and he said to me, I just got accepted to the Naval Academy. I'm like, wow. And then you go there, and it's one of America's like amazing places to go to. And I think everybody should go there in their life. And you see the sacrifice. People don't realize the military and the sacrifice that they do for you every day so that we can have Facebook. You go out to different countries, they don't let you use Facebook. Right. They monitor everything, but so we'd be free. So you can go get a latte, you can go to this movie, you can go watch this, you can say what you want to say on social media. But that's because the military is out there fighting for you. And our son is he's senior now, he'll be graduating soon, he's going to do submarines. But when you go there, when you meet the people, and you realize who they are and the sacrifice they do, it's not college. And one of the things is the N for Navy now, the little symbol, and I have t-shirts that say not college, because you don't get to come and go as you please. You got to go to class. They'll throw you out.
Right.
You got to do military training. You got to wake up every day at 5:30 in the morning.
There's no missing.
And you can't walk off. You can't get breaks. You can't leave the yard, what they call the campus. You can't go anywhere you want to go. But it's amazing the sacrifice. I remember the first day we were there. We were walking in before they shaved his head before they took him in for the first day, and we're just standing there, and it's a beautiful grounds are amazing. There's a lot of heritage there, ancient. And so basically we're standing there, and I'm with my wife and my two sons and Ben. He's getting ready to go in the next day to get his head shaved. And I see this officer coming in from one of the gates, and he's got gold on. I said, this guy must be an officer, right? So there was a military person there, and I said, do you think that officer would take a picture with us? And just because I wanted to get a picture with somebody. And my wife said, stop talking to people. So the guy comes over, and I looked at his bars, and I had read up on this, and it was a captain. I said, Captain, would you mind a picture? And he goes, oh, sure. And so the military person said, whoever was on duty said, sure, he's a nice guy. So he took a picture, and so my wife and my son, and he goes, well, son, did you get directly into the academy, or did you go through prep school first? And he said, well, I got directly. He says, well, that's fantastic. And he says, I'll be seeing you around. And he says, well, thank you, nice to meet you. So I'm looking at his name. And so I looked at the person who was there, the petty officer, and I go, who was that? She says, that's the commandant of the entire Naval Academy.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
And I go, whoa! And actually, him and I were kind of little buddies. He would see me and say, hey, how you doing? My son would be humiliated. He'd like, Dad, that's the commandant. Stop talking. But he's like a guy just like you and I.
Yes, yes.
But, and people love to share this story with you.
So that moment when he called you, you must have been so proud.
I was totally like, I wish I was there.
Yeah.
And I was so proud. We were proud, my wife and I. And I say it's all my wife's doing because I worked all the time where she was raising the children. Mm-hmm. But he had focus. And even though he got into some other colleges for ROTC, he got a great scholarship, he said, I want to go to the Naval Academy. And I think that's what's kept him in there, because it's no party. I mean, you don't get to speak to him, you don't get to see him, and it's really tough, but he did really well, and I respect those people.
Oh, me too, and his mindset is very much like yours was, having, a goal and going after
Harder,
it.
I think.
Now, are all the kids like that?
What's that?
Are all of your kids like that?
Well, to a certain degree. I mean, what the thing is, each child is going to live their own life, and they're all going to move at their own pace, and they're all going to be happy with what they choose. And I think Ben is probably the most determined out of all of them, because just like for me from med school, it's all or none. Either you're in the Naval Academy or you're not. He would have, and if he didn't get in, I'm sure he would have tried again, or he would have went ROTC for sure. He was definitely going in the Navy, but he got in.
Yeah.
And I think they saw that determination when they met him, when they interviewed him. I think they can read that.
Right.
They see enough people, you can read that in somebody's eyes.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
But my other children are amazing in their own way. They do their own things, and I try to support them in their own way. I mean, I was this close to going into the military. I was accepted into the Army Medical Corps.
Okay.
But they lost my file. And so by the time they found my file, they called me and said, "Oh, we found it. I said, "Well, I already got into a state school for medicine, so no thank you." But it would have been Army, it would have been disastrous with my wife, right? Because she's Navy.
Right.
So,
Fantastic. Robotics.
Yeah.
What do you think of them? In your
Robotics,
field?
what's that?
What do you think about them? In your
Robotics in medicine is just amazing. Now, the thing about robotics is it allows, robotics, do you know where robotics started? Robotics was commissioned by the US Army because they wanted to be able to perform surgery in a dangerous area up on the front. So the Army, and I know one of the generals that was commissioned to do that. And I became good friends with him with my speaking. I ran into him one day. And he told me that basically the Army had that. And they were working on doing it like in space, like say you needed surgery in space. What you needed was somebody that knew how to put the instruments into the person, and then somebody on Earth who was a very experienced surgeon could do the surgery. But also on the battlefield, you couldn't bring the best surgeons to the front of the battlefield because they get killed. So that's where robotics came about. And then they saw, industry saw a need for it in just general medicine, for very fine workings, not to have to cut somebody open and things like that. So robotics is a great tool, but you have to understand the limitations of robotics. The robot doesn't do the surgery for you. You control the robot. So we used to joke and say a bad surgeon using a robot is a bad surgeon on the robot. Doesn't make you a good surgeon.
I see.
It does allow you to do a few more things that you wouldn't be able to do if you weren't using a robot. In
that example you gave of the surgeon back on the computer, you know, and someone on the battlefield, is that happening today?
You know, I don't know. Some of that's secret.
Yeah.
A friend of mine works for NASA. He actually went to medical school with him, and he's a captain at NASA, and he asked me questions from time to time about those things. You know, I wouldn't be surprised. The thing that's difficult is the lag. Mm-hmm. You can't have any lag. Like you can't move your hand and then 2 minutes later it moves up in space. Right. And then, oh, there's some bleeding. Okay, so then 2 minutes later you do this. So it's getting there. And like any lag, like Facebook, podcasts, things like that, live podcasts, once that lag is gone, and it will be because it's getting better every year, then it's applicable. It's very doable. Very, very doable.
Do you have any experience using robotics?
Oh, sure. We actually my partner and I brought robot here to Binghamton. There was no robot here. They approached us and said, well, do you want to learn how to do the robot? And, you know, I was doing things without the robot, and I said, yeah, it sounds like fun. Let's go do it. So we got trained out in California at the headquarters and brought it to Binghamton. We did our first couple of robotic cases, I don't know how many years ago it is now, 10 years ago at least. And it's been great since. And so I don't use it much anymore because I can do the same thing without the robot. And so for me, it's not that essential, but for other surgeons, it's very important for them.
What interests do you have outside of work? I heard you
outside
like to
of
paint.
work, what's that?
I heard you like to paint around the house and whatnot.
Well, I love carpentry. I love doing things with my hands. I think it's important that you also, the brain is so unused. There's so many areas in the brain that we just don't use. So it's nice to open up different parts of your brain. Like I like to learn some different languages, but I'm very bad at it. I don't have a language brain, so it's very hard. But I love to learn different words and then meet somebody. And if you go to Disney or on a Disney cruise, immediately you run into people. And my wife's like, please don't try to speak to them in their language. I'm like, but they love it, they love it. And so learn a few different languages. That's a part of my brain that's really stuck right now. I love to use my hands, love to paint. And I think when I paint, and when I say not painting a picture, my sisters got that art. I didn't get that gift. They got that. But very fine things like in the house and things like that, because I change brush sizes. And as my wife says, I can't afford you if you were a real painter because you just take so long to paint one thing because it's got to be perfect.
Perfect, right.
But I think it's that eye-hand motion, you know, learning new things and techniques. And one of these days I'm going to do a little podcast about painting and surgery because you got to use the right brush.
Yeah.
You got to use the right stroke. And you got to use the right equipment. And there's nothing, the real painters know that not all paints are alike. And not all woods are alike. So the surface needs something different. Medicine's the same way. And administrative, hospital administrators had tried to make it so that all the surgeons use the same things the same way every time. And that's wrong. Each surgeon needs something different. Each patient needs something different. Each piece of equipment works a different way. So that's one of my hobbies. I love doing that. And then there isn't much time to do anything else, really. You know, spend time with your family. If you can do that. A lot of surgeons, a lot of doctors, especially now, it's getting harder and harder. You don't get any time with your family anymore. My daughter, I have 4 boys and a daughter, and the difference in age is 9 years from my last child to my daughter. So 4 boys, then 9 years, and then my daughter, 8 years, then my daughter. And it's like a different family, and I keep saying I'm not going to do the same that I did to my boys as I'm going to do to her, in the sense that I'm not going to do the same thing to her. I'm going to spend more time with her. And it's hard. It's not like you hang up the phone, you leave, and you're done with the day. It doesn't work that way as a doctor, no matter what kind of doctor you are. You stay late. You have to take care of your patients. They call you. You call them in the weekend. You have emergencies. Medicine works around the clock. And it's very hard on your family. And traveling. My daughter used to crawl into my suitcase. She didn't want me to leave. She'd hang on my leg. And she'd say, why are you going away to a different country? Why are you leaving us? And I'd say, because somebody somewhere has a daughter like you, and I'd hate for them not to know what to do when they need to do it. So, as she got older, so we had a little thing. Everywhere I'd go away, I'd come back with a little stuffed animal from a different country. So if I went to Africa, I'd bring an elephant. A little elephant. If I went to Indonesia, I'd bring the monkey with the big nose, or a snake from somewhere else. So that was our thing, because every time I'd come in the door, she'd give me a hug, and what'd you bring me? What little animal did you bring me? So she's got over 100 stuffed animals.
That's great.
Yeah, so that was our little thing.
Yeah.
And FaceTime now is really important too.
Family vacations?
I tried. Family vacations, yeah. When we go away, my wife comes from a tremendously big family. I come from a very small family. And so we try to go away as a family if we can. But every once in a while, it's nice just to be with your immediate family, to learn what everybody's doing. Because if you don't sit down and have a dinner, my wife is very big on sitting down and having a dinner, and you don't realize the value of that. Because you don't know your child. I still don't know my children, but you don't know your child until you sit down with them and hear what they're doing. And so we're big of going around the table and saying, so what did you do today? What can you, say something nice. What did you do good today? Or what did you learn today? Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was one thing. And it's interesting.
Important.
Oh my God, we've given that up.
Yeah.
Did you see that commercial recently with who was the Talladega Nights star, when he got the iPhone, and it'll come to me, but so it's a movie star, and he's at dinner, and he's got his cell phone, and the daughter's saying, I had a really tough day in school today, and he goes, shh, 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 I'm getting something on Facebook, be quiet, and it's great, and it talks about that. And I love that commercial because it shows you now how you've given it up. So at our dinner table, cell phones are gone.
Yeah, ours
That's
as well.
important. Yeah, and it's great.
Yeah. So you've taken a lot of flights over the years to different places. Any memorable moments, any memorable people that led to a good conversation?
Yeah, totally. First of all, the relationships, first of all, I will tell you that first impressions are sometimes, or most of the time, wrong. All the biases I had about different people in different countries, I'm amazed at how wrong I was. People around the world are very, very nice. They really are. Sometimes it's governments that aren't nice, but the people are genuinely just wonderful, and they treat you so well, and they appreciate what you do. And I remember one moment, it was my second time I'd been in Saudi Arabia, and the temperature there is, oh my God, it's 100 degrees, 105 degrees. And I had just finished a surgery, just done a hysterectomy. And I'm sitting in the back of the car, and I always wear a suit when I travel, and it's gotta be 110 degrees in the car. So I'm sitting in the car with the people, my guide and the representative that's taking me around. And so these people are walking towards the car. And it's a man with his traditional robe on, with the hat and the band and the tobe, it's called the robe, the white robe. And they're walking rapidly towards our car. And I said to my rep, I said, oh my goodness, I screwed up. Something went wrong with the surgery.
They're worried.
And so I said, what happened? And so the guy goes, don't worry, don't worry. So he opens the window, and the guy says something to him in Arabic. And he hands me a pen and a watch. And so I said to them, what's the matter? And the guy turns around and he goes, that was, you worked on his mother. You just did surgery on his mother. And he's giving you something that's extremely valuable to him. It was a beautiful pen and a watch. And I said, well, I can't take it. And he goes, you have to. And I said, why? He says, they come from a poor part of the country and they traveled all the way here for you to do the surgery on their mother. And you did it, and she looks amazing. Because these surgeries, when you do them and they go well, the patient's sitting up in bed and going, did I have surgery? And so I took them, and I said, shukran, shukran, which means thank you in Arabic, because you have to learn those words. And they were so grateful. And now I keep a case in my office where when something like that happens, I put that in the case, and people say, why do you got that watch? Why is there a watch in your case? So why is this in there? Why is that in there? And so things like that are very, very memorable to me. And people have so little in other countries. They really, really do. Yeah. They really have so little.
Have you, do you collect anything as I know you said you like to bring things home for your daughter, anything
absolutely.
for yourself?
Oh, yeah, well, I was big on Starbucks cups.
Okay.
So every country I went to, I would say to my guide, we got to stop at Starbucks. And he goes, why? So I said, I need the Starbucks cup that say this country in it. So they're all over the kitchen. My wife wants to throw them out. But I don't have the one from Syria because I didn't have time to get to the store to get it, and then now everything is a mess. But so I'm waiting, hopefully I'll get that one. Starbucks cups. Some people give me gifts. Whenever you go to a different country, they give you gifts. Mm-hmm. Like I have a full robe from Saudi Arabia, and I have the hat, and I have other things that they've given me, gifts and tea sets and things like that are great. Dates are really important over there. They give you dates, the kind you eat.
Right, right.
And so that's important. So that's really good. But I think all the relationships, the pictures, the photos, the moments you have with people that you share, those are really important.
You once told me a story about sitting next to Cal Ripken Jr.
Yeah, sure.
Can you share that?
I was actually on my way to London, and I just gave a lecture in Baltimore. So I get on the plane, I'm on a Delta flight, and I'm on the way to Atlanta to catch my overseas flight to London, right? So I'm sitting there, nobody's sitting next to me in the very front row, and all of a sudden this gentleman sits down, a very tall guy, and I look at him and I go, I know this guy from somewhere, I just don't remember where. So I'm watching a movie, and he reaches over and he shakes my hand, and he goes, my name's Cal. And so I go, oh, my name's Jim. And I look, and I put my headphones back on, I go, Cal isn't Cal Ripken? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. And he goes, that's the way I prefer it. So it was a 2-hour flight, 2.5 hours. And so people behind me, I look back and they're like, their eyes are wide open and they're like, they want to be in my seat. And I'm like, well, that ain't happening, number one. But I was speaking to him, and he's a great guy. And we just talked about things, and he talked about a safari went on, and talked about this, talked about his son, talked about this and that. So I said to him, if you ever need a gynecologist, give me a call. I gave him my card, and I didn't take a selfie because, like, okay, I mean, that's great, but he's a guy just like the rest of us, but a great guy. I mean, really nice. And I think some of these people feel lonely because I've met a lot of, people over the years that are very famous or rich, whatever it is, and they just feel like they want to have a nice conversation with somebody, you know?
Without being bothered.
Yeah,
Sure.
And it was great. We didn't talk much about baseball because I don't know much about it, but he talked a little bit about it. He was going to the All-Star game, I remember, and he had all these things he had to read, all the stats he had to memorize, so he could talk about it. He was
doing his prep work.
Yeah, I was doing my prep work, and he was doing his prep
That's
work.
right.
It was kind of cool, just sit there, shoot the breeze with him, and he didn't feel intimidated, and I didn't feel intimidated, and that was kind of nice.
That's neat. How important is it, doctor, for people to live out their story, their life story?
Right.
You mentioned, some people just don't have the resources even to be able to travel to have, something medically taken care of. But in general, for people that are watching, for people that are thinking about what they want to do in the future, not to have the fears, the resistance, how important is that?
It's their life. You only get one life. And it's hard when you have a family and you have to make a decision like that. There are different factors. Everybody has their own situation, their own story. But you don't know what's on the other side of that door. Have I made poor decisions? Absolutely. I had my own practice for years, and I went out of business. That's just the way medicine is. Medicine is very against doctors now. It's horrible, and I don't know why. But have I made poor decisions? Sure. And have I recovered from that? Sure. But you know, if I didn't get my own practice, I never would have met my wife. I wouldn't have her and my wonderful children. So things go certain ways. But that one decision, that's why I like to watch America's Got Talent and stuff like that, because sometimes, as they say, as the judges say, this 2 minutes has changed your life. And whenever I see those shows where that happens, I'm like, yeah. And for me, it's not as glorious as being on TV in front of hundreds of thousands, millions of people, but it's different. And so for young people, should I do that? What if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, go do something else, or at least try it. But what if it does work? You know, and like when people say, what's it like to speak in front of people? And I said, I'm going to give you some pointers, I'll give you some tips, I'm going to do this, but you know something? Go get out there. Go do it. And when people give me advice, I love it, because I'm like, oh, how could I do that better? What did I do? You know, what can I do to do that better? What can I talk about that? Yeah. It's a shame that probably I'll be my best just before I have to retire and stop speaking, right? But make that decision. You know, just go ahead and take that chance if you can. And sometimes it's risky. Sometimes you risk everything. Yep. And especially for young people, I think young people these days, it's because of social media and things, they kind of go into like a self-cave. I don't think that's good. You got to get out there. And how hard do you push your child? Should you tell your child, I want you to be this? I mean, I told my wife I wanted all 4 of my children to go into the Navy. She said, well, you can't push them. I said, well, some parents do. I said, but I don't know when to push and not push. So
it's a tough balance.
It's a tough balance.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not.
Not easy being a parent.
That's right. If you could go back and give some advice to your 20-year-old self, anything different that you would tell yourself? Knowing what you know now?
Yeah, yes. It's a common thing that everybody says, don't worry as much. Because I believe that I believe that everybody has sort of like a spiritual surrounding around them. You know, you don't know what's going to happen after you die. Each religion has their own, and some people think nothing. But I don't think that's, I don't think I would have such a beautiful family by chance. I'm lucky. I'm lucky to be given that. But that's not chance. You can't take all those millions of atoms, put them together, and I have such wonderful people. You can't do that. So I think there's a power there. I don't know what that power is. Is it God? Probably, but God comes in different forms for other people. But I think there's a spirit around everybody. The patients I operate on, you know, while I'm doing surgery, and the things that happen in your life. So what I would say to people is, raise your antennas at 20 years old. Don't think you know everything. And sometimes you just have to trust in that the right thing's going to happen. And at 20, I worried about so many things. At 20, I was worrying about getting into medical school. And would I have still done the same if I didn't worry? Yeah, but at least I wouldn't have worried as much. Right. So when I meet someone that appears not to worry as much and they still do well, I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have learned that. I wish I could have mastered that. How to be successful and not worry as much. I wish I could have done that. That's what I'd give advice to young people. Don't worry as much, but also be careful, because there's a very fine line between bad things in your life, like drugs, getting addicted to things. There's a very fine line by having too much fun and not taking a responsible life route. Mm-hmm. It's a very fine line. Yeah. So easy to be on the wrong side of it. And people go back and forth that line all the time. But eventually I say to my boys, I say, look, you know, you're good kids, you're great kids. Always stay on that line of goodness. Stay on that side, no matter what you do.
Great advice. What happens after we die? What do you think?
I would like to think after I die that I'll come back as something different. You know, you meet people that have old souls on them. I think my daughter has an old soul in her. She's just amazing. I don't know how she got that. But I definitely think that you don't just disappear. There was a movie, and it was about the people that went to space and they came back. It wasn't The Martian, it was another one where the guy went to somewhere, a planet, came back, and he was there, and a book falls off the shelf, and his daughter looks and sees the book, and then she finally meets him when she's older, because we all live in time. Time is always together, okay? And so basically, I think that I hope I'll be there to look over the people what they did for me. So I hope I'll be there for my kids to look over them, to be a spirit around them. I think that if you and I are sitting here right now, and my mother came in spirit, you'd have a heart attack, and I'd say, really, I'm in the middle of a shoot. Because for me, if that happened, I'd be okay with that.
I see.
But the average person, if a spirit showed themselves in one way or another, it would destroy them. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's a breeze. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a person that smiles at you. Maybe it's something that goes right for you. Maybe someone sends you a message that you don't know what that is. Maybe your day goes well. Yeah. And maybe they give you these bad days so you can appreciate when a day goes well, right?
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
If every day was good in your life, you would get used to it. You would appreciate it, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So I think after you die, you exist as a spirit, and you exist as an entity that helps other people. And it might be your own people. Who knows? What, I don't know. I'll let you know later when I run into you.
That's great. Well, this has been wonderful.
It's been great. Thank
definitely
you
want to have you
me.
back, because there's so many other topics that we could
Totally.
discuss. But before I let you go, Dr. Kondrup,
Yep.
One last question.
Sure.
What do you want your legacy to be?
My kids have a thing, they call me legend, and I'd say, first of all, I don't want one of those boring sort of wakes where everybody comes by and they're all sad. Don't be sad, I've had a great life. Don't be sad. I want to have a party at my wake. I want to have that's fine. I want to have a great picture there, I want the mortician to put a smile on my face, okay? I don't want to be like, I don't want that. But I want my kids to say, yeah, I made a difference to somebody in my life. That's what I want my legacy to be. I made a difference. People, he was a great teacher. I really enjoyed that guy, He was awesome. And he did everything he could to put everything into teaching something, no matter what it was. He put his all in there. That's what I would like. That's what I want. And to be remembered as a good father and a good husband.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you,
We
Roger.
appreciate it, and we'll do it again.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great, thanks.